The USS Indianapolis had conveyed the pivotal parts of the principal operational nuclear bomb to a maritime base on the Pacific island of Tinian. On August 6, 1945, the weapon would level Hiroshima. However, on July 28, the Indianapolis cruised from Guam without an escort to meet the war vessel USS Idaho in the Leyte Gulf in the Philippines and get ready for an attack on Japan. Talking about the story of the deadliest shark attack in the US, you must know the whole scenario. Here are the circumstances. The following day hushed up, with the Indianapolis making around 17 bunches through swells of 5 or 6 feet in the perpetual Pacific. Be that as it may, soon after midnight, a Japanese torpedo hit the Indianapolis in the starboard bow, destroying right around 65 feet of the boat's bow and touching off a tank containing 3,500 gallons of aeronautics fuel into a mainstay of fire, shooting a few hundred feet into the sky. At that point, another torpedo from a similar submarine hit nearer to midship, hitting fuel tanks and powder magazines and setting off a chain response of blasts that adequately tore the Indianapolis in two. As yet going at 17 bunches, the Indianapolis started taking on gigantic measures of water. The boat sank in only 12 minutes. Of the 1,196 men on board, 900 made it into the water alive. Their trial, what is viewed as the most exceedingly awful shark assault ever, was simply startling. As the sun rose on July 30th, the survivors bounced in the water. Lifeboats were little. The living looked for the dead, skimming in the water, and appropriated their life jackets for survivors who had none. Wanting to maintain some similarity to control, survivors started shaping gatherings some more than 300 in the untamed water. Before long enough, they would fight off honesty, thirst, and sharks. The primary evening, the sharks zeroed in on the skimming dead. However, the survivors' battles in the water just pulled in an ever-increasing number of sharks, which could feel their movements through an organic element known as a parallel line, receptors along with their bodies that get changes in pressing factor, in development from many yards away. As the sharks turned their considerations toward the living, particularly the harmed and the dying, mariners attempted to isolate themselves away from anybody with an open injury. And when somebody kicked the bucket, they would drive the body away, expecting to charge the carcass as a trade-off for relief from a shark's jaw. Numerous survivors were incapacitated with dread, unfit even to eat or drink from the smaller portions they had rescued from their boat. One gathering of survivors tragically opened a container of Spam. However, before they could taste it, the aroma of the meat drew a multitude of sharks around them. They disposed of their meat of portions instead of danger a second gathering. The creatures were drawn by the sound of the blasts, the sinking of the boat, and the whipping in blood in the water. Although numerous types of sharks live in the untamed water, none is considered as forceful as the maritime whitetip. Reports from the Indianapolis survivors demonstrate that the sharks would in general assault live casualties near the surface. The sharks took care of for quite a long time, with no indication of rescue for the men. Naval Force knowledge had caught a message from the Japanese submarine that had destroyed the Indianapolis, portraying how it had sunk an American ship along the Indianapolis's course. Yet the message was ignored as a stunt to draw American salvage boats into a snare. Meanwhile, the Indianapolis survivors discovered that they had the best chances in a gathering, and in a perfect world, in the focal point of the gathering. The men on the edges, or more terrible, alone, were the most powerless to the sharks. As the days passed, numerous survivors capitulated to warmth and thirst, or endured fantasies that constrained them to drink the seawater around them, a sentence of death by salt harming. The individuals who so slaked their thirst would slip into franticness. Frothing at the mouth as their tongues and lips expand, they frequently became an incredible danger to the survivors. As the sharks hovering beneath, many hauled their companions submerged with them as they passed on. After 11 a.m., on their fourth day in the water, a Navy plane flying overhead detected the Indianapolis survivors and radioed for help. In practically no time, another seaplane, monitored by Lieutenant Adrian Marks, got back to the scene and dropped boats and durable supplies. At the point when Marks saw men being assaulted by sharks, he defied arranges and arrived in the invaded waters, and afterward started maneuvering his plane to help the injured and strays, who were in the most danger. A brief time after midnight, the USS Doyle showed up on the scene and assisted with pulling the last survivors from the water. Of the Indianapolis's unique 1,196-man team, just 317 remained. Assessments of the number who kicked the bucket from shark assaults range from a couple of dozen to very nearly 150. It's difficult, no doubt. In any case, the experience of the Indianapolis survivors stays the most exceedingly terrible oceanic fiasco in U.S. maritime history. This story of the deadliest shark attack has been the most awful and threatening of all time.